Yo, test, test, test. I got the earbuds in. Don't know if they pick up the volume or not, or if it's my phone. We will find out. Alright, what's going on, everybody? So, funny little synchronicity. Ralph Smart, I watched a video today while I was on break, his newest video, and in that video he talks about how his end game video was removed from YouTube due to him not following the policies. I don't know what policy it was. But it's kind of like when a cop slaps you with you weren't keeping the peace by like just speeding, or you get into some accident. It happened to me. Flipped my friend's Tahoe, and I had a beer on my breath but I didn't blow over when they did the test. And the cop, I was on conditions. That's my first time getting caught smuggling. And court hadn't gone through yet, but they had me on conditions. And, I breached for being around other criminals. I breached for having that beer on my breath, and that's not keeping the peace, apparently. No, that was its own thing, because apparently for when I was caught smuggling, they told me I shouldn't I'm not allowed to drink, basically. So no, it wasn't even that. But I got to not keeping the peace somehow, because I was going 60 on the 417, which at that time was 100 kilometers per hour. But I was going 60 because it's a snowstorm. And he said, well, no one else is going 60. No one else flipped their thing. So yeah, you weren't keeping the peace. Like, what? But like I wasn't keeping the pace, yet my pace was slower. Sorry, I'm fixing my fucking tire right now out there, so my nose is running because it's cold as fuck. We had minus 28, minus 24, minus 23 already this week, and I'm working outside. Yay! Anyways, so, and apparently he's not allowed to upload. He said something in that video about not being able to upload videos for 7 days. So, kind of like don't understand how he uploaded a video if that's the case, if he's fighting it or whatnot. I'm not saying he's lying. That's not what I'm saying at all. Because I was at that stage before where I had to use different ways to upload videos, and I think it was because I had a strike against me or something like that on YouTube, and I wasn't able to do it from my phone. I had to do it from a computer, and I had to get a second account. I don't know. Not a second account, but it was still attached to my first account, so I was able to. Anyways, it was weird how I did it, but anyways. So I don't know if that's the case or what's going on with him, but it's funny because my last video I just put out, I don't know if it was my last one. I think it was my last one. I was talking about a fucking magical practitioners union in it, and that's what it would be for. It would be protecting us for being able to say whatever we want to fucking say. Maybe we even have some paralegals or some maybe even a new age / witchy fucking lawyer on that union who can actually give fucking YouTube the what's what on their own policies and finding loopholes for us. I mean, I'm sure we could do that on our own, but knowing the law and having that title of lawyer tends to help that out. Anyways, I just thought that was a funny synchronicity. I want to point it out. But what I want to talk about today is magic. Of course, that's all I talk about, really. But what I try to do is show you the magic in everyday life, how everything is magic. Anyways, so there's 2 TED Talks I'm going to play here that circle the same drain. One's a guy who is probably a witch. He talks about having their own little no device Sabbath on Sunday. And right there, and there's a bunch of other red flags that while he was talking, I assumed that he was a witch, or at least some kind of magical practitioner. But he talks about how it's not really his gender or his anything really, but he likes to knit. And what this is about the brain, of course. Everybody knows I'm pretty obsessed with the brain and breathing and how all these things are connected. So, in the different systems. But anyways, the second one you're going to hear is, first one's about how to get focus back. How the electronics and our devices aren't necessarily there to steal our attention and dumb us down. However, that is a byproduct. But it would be foolish to just shun from all those things and not use the benefits they also have, right? And then, but there are a lot of correlations to the other one where it's a neurologist, a scientist who studies the brain and teaches about it, who does experiments with rats very successfully, might I add. She talks about how depression is linked to the mind, and how it makes sense for us to want to give people pills for depression. And by all means, if you're depressed, you're in a dark place, you got nothing to lose, you might as well go and try the pills first. The pills get you to a better place. Then potentially you start the techniques this lady is talking about, and she's talking about using your own behavior. And because there's a part of your brain that is very large, and it's a part of the brain that's connected to the motor skills of your hands, meaning nature, the universe, God, if you will. You can learn at what nature. You can learn at the reason I like this one so much is there's something she infers here, and it's that we can study nature and what nature wants us to know by looking at the brain, looking at our bodies, looking at anatomy, looking at the world. And by her studying the brain and seeing that the part of the brain, the cerebellum, I think it was. No, cerebellum is where 80% of the neurons are coming from. But it might have been the same one as well. It's a very large spot of your brain, and 80% of the neurons in that spot that make up the big chunk of the 100% of the neurons in your brain. And that's associated with the more skills in your hands, meaning that your hands are very important. Moving your hands, working with your hands, doing stuff with your hands is very important. And the first thing that came to mind is after you hear what she has to say, video games. So I've said before, but I don't think video games are as bad as TV, because TV, you're just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. With video games, you're engaged, you're into it, you're moving your hands, and I think that's why it's also more addictive and easier to just stay all day playing video games, because the fact that you're moving your hands and you're getting a sense of accomplishment at the same time. So you're igniting this I achieved something circuit, which releases dopamine and serotonin and all those lovely chemicals that our brain produces naturally. But the things she says in this are so powerful to me, because it's talking about how our ancestors, and just not even far away, our grandparents, my grandparents are the same way. I mean, they're more traditional, whereas my grandmothers never worked and my grandfathers did. But I'm really tired right now, I'm sorry guys. But it talks about her grandmother knitting, and the first guy said, well, he knits and things come to him. And it reminded me of what I like to teach and talk about, how I come in the car and sitting here is not, I can still get good ideas when I'm sitting here, but when I'm driving, my mind is busy focusing, my conscious mind is busy focusing on the road, and my subconscious is wide open and I get all these thoughts. And he talks about how when you remove yourself from your device, this is the first one about focus and attention spans, when you remove yourself from your device, to that addiction to your device, because what happens is you're on Facebook, right? You're absorbing things, and let's say you're at work. Well, you're at work, or you're on Facebook, so I think it's 40 seconds people do something nonstop while they're working, and they'll stop, look at the phone, do something else, whatever. They can't do something uninterrupted for more than 40 seconds. And that's the thing with Facebook and all these other social media apps, is you're on them, you're within them. They're not like a game, but they're it's this ongoing thing. And every time you open it up, you get a dopamine hit. A fucking, it feels good. We are addicted to these things in the truest sense of that part of the brain, that cocaine and heroin fucking trigger, is the same thing you get from both negative and positive emotions, both when you're achieving your goals and also just going onto Facebook and seeing if there's anything there. It's like opening a present, what's going on today. But if you're at a meeting and you're going into that meeting and you're just on Facebook and you just say, I'm going in my meeting, well, you're still on Facebook. Your mind is still there, because your mind, that's what goes back to what I was talking about. You point your mind in whatever direction you want it to go. It'll give you information there. But a byproduct of that is when you point your mind on Facebook, or, hey, by the way, I don't know what these lights are doing here. It's very cool. It's not a fucking, whatever those things are called that you put on the background or whatever. It's just the glare because of the cold and the condensation and some other crap I don't really understand. But nonetheless, I was saying, point your mind at something, you'll get all that information. But if you've been on Facebook and you're going to a meeting, well, unless you were just researching your meeting or going over the things you're about to say at this meeting, then your mind's not on the meeting. It's still in what you were previously doing. And, that's a really good thing to understand. He also says that when we're just sitting quietly or just throughout our day, our mind tends to go to three places. First is the past, then it's the present, And then the future is like double the past and the present. The amount of times we go there, which isn't good, because if, like, let's use magic as an example. If you do magic and say, I'm so grateful that I'm soon going to receive, or I'm about to receive, or you know what I mean, it's always going to be in the future, unless you give it a time limit. You set a specific date, then that's different. But without setting a specific date, and you just, you just fucking Jesus, sorry, I gotta just check my tire pressure. Okay, if you set a goal like that without a time limit, then it's always in the future. Set a time limit, well, then it's different. Then it comes to you within that time, and then it's kind of like a present thing, But if you can do most of your thinking in the present, receive thinking within the present, and ask for things as if you already have them in the present, your brain will point at that direction once again. It will give that energy, it'll create it, and then it will come to you. But anyways, there's a lot of stuff in these 2 fucking TED Talks. It's just jam-packed with occult knowledge done in a scientific way, and it's mind-boggling how sorry, you gotta give me a second. I gotta go check my tire. Give me one moment.
Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and/or evaluating information gathered from, or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. The adjective intellectual describes something related to or using the mind or intellect. Intellectual is often used to describe intensive reasoning and deep thinking, particularly in relation to subjects that tend to spark deep discussion, such as literature or philosophy. One ADJ intellectual means involving a person's ability to think and to understand ideas and information. Do different things that make you smarter. The point of this list involves diversifying your day. Manage your time wisely. Read a little every day. Review learned information. Study a second. An intellectual is a person who engages in critical thinking, research, and reflection about the reality of society, and proposes solutions for the normative problems of society, and thus gains authority as a public intellectual.
Conspiracy theory, or they want to argue with me when I tell them, no, I've done critical thinking about that, and that's not accurate. That's your projection. Their response to me, without realizing it, is they want to say, you're taking away the right of me to have my... Here's where you run into the law of attraction. I'm here to tell you that the law of attraction is an intellectualization. The intellect is one of the ways we protect ourselves from potential dangers. The intellect does a lot of other things, useful things, like tells you to drive on in the United States, the right side of the street. It tells you what is up, what is down. It does look for dangers, but it's really just about figuring things out. There's no emotion involved. People who are very stuck in their heads are people who are trying to avoid their emotions. Which is why on my channel, I'm always telling people, if you share an emotion with me, you'll get a far better response from me than if you want to give me these long, huge diatribes about why I'm wrong. Conspiracy theory, or they want to argue with me when I tell them, no, I've done critical thinking about that, and that's not accurate. That's your projection. Their response to me, without realizing it, is they want to say, you're taking away the right of me to have my in your head. You're trying to figure it out. So the law of attraction wants to give you this intellectualized, pseudo-emotional experience. It says if you have a happy feeling, you'll get happy things. That's what abusive parents say. Better put a smile on your face if you want dinner tonight. Don't come at me with that frown. Don't you whine and complain. I'll give you something to whine about. So you learn if you want good things from mom and dad, you better make them happy. So a lot of the Western magicians want to come up with all of this, I think this and my intentions is what created, but that's not going to do any good if you're full of fear and anger. Worse if you're unconscious about your fear and anger. All of the rituals and the figuring it all out isn't going to do anything if your heart center is closed. You're going to have to figure out, I got to be happy if I want money. I got to think about money and put a happy feeling on it. And that'll go out there, and then it'll attract happy things. It's a total, again, it's, Christianity was a projection context, but my response was, that's something to the effect of, that's an incomplete way of going about it. It doesn't matter if you aren't going after what your soul wants. Any technique to try and make the universe give you what you want isn't going to work. Now, when that happens and you're operating from that, you're into the law of attraction, and you say, oh, money is a result of, if I think positive things about money, money will come to me. You're not even addressing what you want to do. You're not even, a lot of the Western magicians want to come up with all of this, I think this and my intentions is what created, but that's not going to do any good if you're full of fear and anger. Worse if you're unconscious about your fear and anger. All of the rituals and the figuring it all out isn't going to do anything if your heart center is closed off.
An intellectual is a person who engages in critical thinking, research, and reflection about the reality of society, and proposes solutions for the normative problems of society, and thus gains authority as a public intellectual. Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and/or evaluating information gathered from, or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action.
Alright, so I know I said I wasn't going to do it, but I guess I just did it. And I'll be clear, I'm not insulting, but I said it before. Someone actively goes against my tradition, I'm gonna stand up for it, just so that it's out there as public record. And if anybody ever watches somebody who's against it, well, at least they got my word, at least for it. And I mean, you don't even have to take my word for it, and maybe it's best if I just leave it alone and I don't say anything, so I'll try not to. But ever just showed someone who I've showed many times in the past saying something. Initially, he starts off by saying about the law of attraction. If they say something and have an intention and they add a happy feeling to it, then they'll draw it to them, and that's horseshit. And then later on in the same video, he goes on to say you have these Western magicians doing rituals and using their intention and coming up with all these intellectual things. And he says it's not going to do you any good because you're full of fear or whatever. Well, a bunch of assumptions, but anyways. So basically saying, he said it without saying it, but basically, well, if you have love and you open your heart center, then those ways would work. But first he says, well, the law of attraction, adding that feeling, that emotion, is not going to do shit. And then he says for the Western magicians, it's not going to do shit unless they do the same way that he said it just wouldn't work. You know what I mean? It's just so paradoxical. And it's like, why would you talk about something if you've never done it? It just doesn't make any sense in my head. It's one thing to say, okay, my opinion is this won't work, but I've never tried it. It's like to say it doesn't work, but without ever trying it, it's like, or he knows there is power in it and he doesn't want people to do it unless they come to him and pays for his services. But I'm telling you right now, shit fucking works, man. You can go look at, like I said, Birch or Frederick Xavier. There's many testimonials on Frederick Xavier's channel. One of his most recent videos were all testimonials. And it's just from the reject, banish, deny simple technique to doing the rituals from the book Wild and Great Work Self-Transformation to his programs. They've all worked. If you do this stuff, you get stuff to you. In all honesty, it doesn't matter. You can manage. Okay, you have, in my opinion, the flawless way to get the best results is to be depolarized and not attached, which means you're in the middle. Which he actively goes against in this video as well. Says people are in the middle, it's too scared to have an opinion. And I said that in my last video. I'm not for or against a lot of things because, first of all, I haven't done enough research, and I think it's irresponsible of me to put out an opinion unless I completely and 100% back it up. Just like it would be irresponsible of me to come out here and either make fun of other traditions I've never tried, or say stuff works from a tradition that I've also never tried. It'd be irresponsible because then I'm sending out information that I don't know is accurate, and then people may or may not try it based on what I said. And I hold myself to a higher responsibility and a moral standard that I'm not going to speak about anything that I haven't done. You know what I mean? So it's just a flawed line of thinking, and I guess I was wrong. But maybe some people can't change. Maybe some people are just in a mood sometimes. Like I said, I try not to do videos when I'm upset and angry or whatever the case is, but who knows why he decided to go there today. Maybe he didn't want to talk about it before, but to discount all that, it's like everybody is manifesting their reality. It's been done by their programming, by repetition. These TED Talks I'm going to show you, it talks about neuroplasticity, which is a science. It's a proven science. Our brains adapt through repetition, okay? The more you repeat something, the more it becomes ingrained in your mind, and depending on what it is you're repeating, it can become a habit. So repeating an affirmation over and over and over and over and over and over again is not necessary. That is in a habit of itself. The affirmation, repeating the affirmation would be the habit. You get into a habit of repeating the affirmation, and then, you basically don't have to try anymore. You're just going to start doing it. You're going to wake up and catch yourself doing it. You're going to be doing it in your sleep, which is a good thing, because once you get to that point, it's not far till whatever you're saying is going to manifest, because you are at the point where your subconscious has put it in the unconscious for that reptilian brainstem to now make it an autonomic function, basically. So something that's just going to start happening on its own. This is how we were programmed. This is how our lives are working for us. Everything we've done repetitively, seen repetitively, been told repetitively, and we watch and listen to repetitively, creates what's going to happen. And people are manifesting the reality whether they know it or not. So to go out there and say all these ways that we're doing don't work, or we have it wrong, or they work but the people are in fear because he just knows that about everybody, it's just stupid and silly, and it's just more scarcity mindset. I see once again. He's scared of people having results of these things, and I mean, I agree with him to a certain extent, where when he sees information and people and victim mentality, all that stuff I agree with, because that's detrimental to you. But someone, and once again, this is what I meant by the people who are manipulated into believing stuff like flat earth, globe earth, whatever. And if anybody watching believes in one of those, that's fine. I don't care. It doesn't bug me what you believe in. You'll eventually come to what truth is for you. And in all honesty, whether we know someone who works in NASA or not, or whatever the case may be, we can't know infallibly 100% which one's real or not. So, I mean, it's up to you. You can make the judgment call and choose to believe what you're told, and choose to, this makes the most sense. So I did the pros and cons on both sides, and I'm going with this side, and that's fine. Have that belief, whatever. I choose not to do that on things that I can't infallibly prove, because there's so many other things in my life that are more important than knowing if fucking NASA or the fucking earth is fucking flat around. What the fuck does that matter to me? What matters to me is my family being having my kids being, successful in their life and learning, and me doing a good job as a parent. That's important to me. Me being able to provide for my family is important to me. Me being able to continue my studies, my practice, and keep upping my game without trying to go too fast, too hard, and get too extreme into it again, where my family and my marital life can suffer. These things are important to me. To sit there and debate about politics that won't fucking matter, about globe earth, flat earth that won't fucking matter, about conspiracies that won't fucking matter, about which magics are better than other magics, like, come on. Like, what the fuck is the point of doing that shit? To come out there and say it's all about the heart center and all that, that's good information, and then all of a sudden to just flip that around and start fucking dissing other traditions, like, grow up, man. Like, seriously, it's time to fucking grow up. Empower your own shit and leave other traditions that you've never done fucking alone, because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. From the like I said, the people that I'm gonna play, the fucking scientists that talk about how the brain can be adapted, and it's through repetition and your actions. And your actions can be literally saying and thinking things. You can think things, and that could be the action that folds your fucking mind into this new pattern. You can do things that'll fold your mind into a new pattern. You know what I mean? You can say things that'll fold your mind into a new pattern. The emotion can be irrelevant at that time, but the emotion is electricity. That it's energy. It's electricity, right? That's a whole part of the brain, the limbic system. That's where all the emotions come from. That tell the neocortex. The neocortex takes in the information from the 5 senses, and that tells the limbic system how to react. Or sometimes just by seeing something, you get scared, or you get excited or turned on, and it tells the limbic system, okay, we need to get, if it's turned on, this person needs to be aroused. Man or woman's different, up, hard, or wet. And if it's I'm in fear because this person wants to kick my ass, well, it's either I got to run out of here, or I need the blood in my hands and feet because I got to fucking kick and punch. So that's how this operation works. So when you know this, and that's the one thing I don't like either. He talks about critical thinking. He critically thought about the NASA thing, and he chooses his opinion. But then he goes and tells people how they're thinking about this magic stuff, about spirituality, about the law of attraction's intellectual. It's like, okay, you can critically think about these things too. Like, you're not supposed to critically think about your spirituality. I'm pretty sure he did that about Christianity, but for his tradition, it's okay to not, don't you're thinking too much about it. But I thought a lot about this, and I have my opinion. It's like, okay, but now you have an opinion without critically thinking. Like, you're not making any fucking sense. You're just. Hopefully, no disrespect to any people that follow him. They follow him for a reason. And once again, I think he's got something to offer. But when he does these videos and he gets into that stuff, it's just it's fear and scarcity he's in. It's like, why does he care? If there's traditions that people are doing don't work, they'll figure that out for themselves. If they haven't figured that out, whether it works or doesn't work yet, then they haven't practiced it, and they're just involved in taking in too much information and never being armchair cultists. But if you were to try the law of attraction, and let's say you try the one version where it's just broad, vague statements a couple times a day, it's like, yeah, it's not going to work. But then if you take the law of attraction and you learn ceremonial magic or a type of witchcraft, which is how I did it, and then you see how the law of attraction from a different angle of the way of, okay, if I use a tape recorder and I record these affirmations down and I put myself into a different state of mind, which has been proven, theta is where hypnosis happens, where we're more susceptible to things going right into that part of the mind. Kind of what happens when you watch TV. Well, if you do this to yourself, but consciously prior to that, you fucking write down what you want to say, what programming you want, put on that recorder, you put yourself into theta. There's ways to learn how to do this. Then you can use this affirmation, law of attraction stuff on a level that will fucking work. You know what I mean? You can listen to that thing over and over and over during the day. You can put it on at night while you're sleeping. I mean, there's so many ways that this works. And for someone to just try to shoot it out when they never even did it, because he's making fun of like the base version of it, and the reason why the base version of that is probably ridiculous and doesn't make sense is because it's for the people that can't critically think or fucking think outside the box to put it together properly. The people that aren't ready for it yet are those people out there dissing it because they didn't have either the patience or the know-how to do it, But people that do know how to do it, it's pretty fucking simple. And once again, back to what I just said, it's like, if you're in fear and all that, well, that's an emotion. And if you're thinking thoughts or doing actions that are in line with that, well, those are the things you're going to put energy into and manifest. Because you got all the symbolism, you got the whole formula there. Likewise, you can do it the opposite way. The opposite way, trying to bring stuff to you that you want, is definitely harder than doing the way you don't want. Adding that fear emotion to thoughts of stuff you don't want, anxiety-provoking thoughts and all that, and then taking actions that are not in line with, because if you take the opposite action with those two, with fear and the thoughts of fear, but you decide not to do actions that are going to be in line with that, meaning like whether it's health, okay, you're having all these bad thoughts that you're going to be sick, and you're putting that fear emotion into it, but you decide to go to the gym and work out, and those fear thoughts and that fear emotion motivates you to take action and do the opposite. Well, you're going to manifest a healthier life, because eventually you're going to start seeing results from that action. That emotion is still energy. You can use fear. Anger is both positive and negative, by the way. But you can use that, and you'll start getting the opposite. So then your thoughts are going to change and say, wow, okay, no, I'm really healthy. I'm in a good place. And then those emotions are going to change, and then your action is still going to be there, and that's when you start manifesting things. And that's the point of the law of attraction. Well, not maybe affirmations more than the law of attraction, but that's kind of the point. It's to start the neuroplasticity process. It's to start making new neural pathways in your mind. So you have all these neural pathways that have already been programmed that keep manifesting what happens in your life, that keeps making you repeat the same things over and over again, so everything stays the same, but you're still adding energy over and over again to things for it to manifest into your reality over and over again. That's how it works. And when you start a process by saying, okay, well, I'm going to take control of my life. Yes, an affirmation is something that you don't have yet, and that maybe you thought you can't get. And then you see this information, you say, what the hell do I have to lose? So you start saying something like that. I'm so grateful that I'm able to pay all my bills and have 10% left over to hold in the bank, and whatever, my family, everybody has what they need, and everybody's happy and joyful and creative and loving, blah, 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 blah. Whatever you want to fucking do there. When you start saying that every day to start making a new neural pathway that's going to get rid of the opposite one that may already be there, right? This is where the magic comes in, because you can banish the old one and get the new one, and it's a shortcut. But nonetheless, you're starting that new neural pathway. You're starting this new habit of saying this thing. And you say it so much until maybe you start believing it. Or, at the very least, you start saying it so much that you created a new habit of saying this affirmation, which makes all affirmations you do afterwards easier, because you created the habit of taking the time out of your day, because this is something that takes priority, because you believe it's going to change your life. And that belief in there is powerful. It's like the whole placebo effect. You think something will work, it will work. So you start doing that every day, and then it becomes autonomic. Your body will just take over and do it for you. You'll find ways to say it whenever. You'll just notice yourself saying it. And so then when you do future affirmations, well, you already created that habit process, the habit of taking time to do that, whether that's recording it, whether it's whatever way you choose to do it. And then once it becomes autonomic, well, that means you put so much energy into it that it was created in the astral. The astral is the Sephiroth of Yesod, which is the moon. The moon is your subconscious mind. Once you get it in there, it's a matter of time until you know this is going to happen and it's going to work. It's just about whenever you least suspect it, the path of least resistance for it getting to you. That's it. But that's what this process is. It's one of those ways to make the process of neuroplasticity happen, where your brain is, it's deep in all these fucking chemicals that it produces, but it's like a plastic. It can form, which is also why it's so vulnerable, and why, your brain starts swelling within your skull. You're a vegetable, you know what I mean? You get hit, you can puncture your heart, and you can, survive for a while, but the brain sometimes, it's just game over. Which, because we don't understand much about it. Like I said before, there's these things where you suspend someone who has their vertebrae, they're severed, where they can't use their legs anymore. They're paraplegic. Yet if you suspend them over a treadmill, that their body knows that what happens on a treadmill, you start walking. Well, their legs will start moving, even though they don't have control over it because of their brain. Which means, we're probably too much into our heads. But to be able to separate that is a process, and this magic, ceremonial magic, witchcraft, these things are a way to change that process. The neuroplasticity is a way to take control and control your brain, your functions, your reality, yourself. And anybody out there saying otherwise, especially when they have paradoxes with things, just I have a big problem with that. So, I didn't know how to keep going and how to segue into what I'm about to show you guys and play. And then all of a sudden I knew Friday night, he must be off on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday or something like that. So he works like probably Monday to Friday or whatever, or Monday to Thursday, or whatever days of the week it is over there. Because, he always comes on like Friday around this time, Saturday and Sunday. And that's it. So, I got nothing against him. Once again, it's just saying, and when I say I'm in the middle, it's because I bounce from both sides. I'm not always just in the middle. I'm not always just 50% love, 50% hate. I'm not always just 50% right, 50% left. I'm not. That's not how it works. It's like I am in a place where I know when it's appropriate to be on the right, when it's appropriate to be on the left, when it's appropriate to be positive, when it's appropriate to be negative, when it's appropriate to stagger. I don't look at stuff that don't matter like that. Now, if you're somebody who's a guru and working part-time because you don't have responsibility or kids or whatever the case is, then maybe you can look into all these things and actively try to debunk them and critically think about other traditions, and then tell people to not critically think about your tradition because they probably realize it doesn't make sense. But, it's like, what's the point of doing any of that? Why not? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If these things work, fads, trends, things, gossip. That's why, things that last have truth to them. Things that don't last don't have truth to them. So, as much as what Christianity may have done to our civilization, so on and so forth, and all the bad things that come along with that, because there are some, why do those stories remain? Well, because they're archetypal. They last the test of time because they're actually older stories that are retranslated. And even though they may not sound modern, they're way more modern than the older ones. So if the law of attraction is still around, well, it's for a reason. If affirmations and ceremonial magic's still around, there's a fucking reason. And it's because there's something to it. But you don't cast fucking pearls before swine. So you don't just give out all the secrets. The knowledge is in seeking. So they give you the base formula for affirmations. And after that, you gotta fucking figure this shit out. Because what works for one guy is not gonna work for another guy. What works for one girl is not gonna work for another girl. What works for one girl will work for a guy, kids, whomever. You know what I mean? They give you the basics. And the really powerful stuff, they can code it like different doctrines, different books are, made to look like scary stuff. So people just stay away because they're not ready for it. They have to hide this stuff in plain sight. They have to hide this stuff in a shroud of, deception so that the wrong people don't get the true information. It's just as simple as that. And someone who can't let the fact go, it's like you've already said your piece about affirmations and the law of attraction, ceremonial magic. Why do you got to keep beating that horse to death? It's because there's a motive there. There's a motivation there. There's something he's trying to do. Every time he has to bring up Western magic, every time he has to bring up affirmations or new age or law of attraction, it's because he's got a motivation. He's got a fucking, and he talks about projecting. He talks about projecting a lot. Well, he sure does a lot of projecting himself. That's natural, right? That's how he knows about it, because he does it, but he's still doing it. He's projecting all the things that, it just sucks because, I thought he was past this, you know what I mean? I thought he was in a place where he's actually ready to help people at a new level, and, his business is going to be going through the roof, and, to the point where I was debating on even getting a fucking chart reading done by the man, and then see something like this is just like, oh, it was so, I won't even watch the ending because it's disempowering. My mind's already been made and folded for that magic, my type of magic, and what I do is real and works. But through repetition, like you're gonna hear it in this. We talk about how doctors used to prescribe sewing to women who were, I forget the word they used, but very much controlled and had lots of anxiety. It's because they're doing something with their hands. Like I said already, there's part of your brain that's dedicated to the motor function of your hands. It's a very big part of the brain. We knew this at one time. We knew this at one time. It's very important to get your hands moving and doing things. The drama and ritual and the lighting of the candles and the writing and all this stuff is done with your hands. You know, automatic writing, you know what I mean? The law of attraction, doing, saying, you know, acting out, whatever. All these things, they have power in them. But anyways, point is, the other guy, the guy who was talking about the focus, said he liked to knit, and that's when he got his best ideas would come to him. He's consciously doing something. He's moving his hands, right? He's releasing serotonin, dopamine, all that shit, and then all these great ideas come to him. Doctors used to prescribe this to people. I think it was Darwin, she said, whenever he was figuring out natural selection. I'm not saying, you know, I don't have an opinion, although I don't necessarily, it doesn't matter. Anyways, he would walk around his yard, and, you know, to make it seem like he did something, he would hit a rock with a stick or something like that. He had to do something with his hands. You know what I mean? And the girl said something about cake batter. You know, used to come in, all you had to do was put the cake batter in the fucking thing and then put it in the oven, right? And the rest was done, but people weren't feeling, and this is like back in the day, and the women weren't feeling too proud of their cakes. So they changed it where you have to add water and egg, because they knew getting into their hands involved make it feel it's like your personal touch. You know what I mean? Your house isn't really your house until you start painting it and putting things on the wall or whatever the case is. We like to personalize things. We like to use our hands. We talk with our hands. You know, this shit is fucking important, and all this stuff is equally. It makes sense. We have a lot of people that want to tell people what they should or shouldn't do, but without actually doing the processes. And it's like, that isn't correct, you know. And like I said, these videos, I saw them last night, and it was like great. This is great. I got to make something of it. I didn't know what to make of it, but now I have exactly what I need from, you know, unfortunately, somebody I didn't want to keep bringing up anymore. But it's like, well, I'm gonna take exactly what he says and show you why it's fucking wrong. I mean, for me, anyways. By me making that candle for the last 4 fucking years now. I checked. It's been about 4 years now. Steady making a candle every night to a different god of the fucking week. Asking from anything from knowledge to health, healing, to prosperity, to making sure I am always on my good sex game, to my kids, you know, not having such an issue doing chores, all this shit. What I made repetitious was the candle. So I created a neural pathway in my mind that says, when I write on this candle, it's going to disappear. Whether all the putting enough energy into the astral and then having to come down here, whether that's real or not, it's just another way to look at it. I created a neural pathway that says, when I write something on this candle, that thing manifests in my life. I made it such a habit that I can't go to bed until I fucking write on a candle, which means I created a habit of, I manifest whatever I want on a candle. I also created a habit that I can't go to bed without writing on that candle. So, you know, win-win. And it helps, you know what I mean? I also made a habit of coming out here and recording, where the point where, you know, if it's been 2 days I don't record, I feel like, oh my god, I gotta record something. You know what I mean? You can make these neural pathways. This can work to your detriment too, though. You can get addicted to watching TV, playing video games, you know, doing drugs, whatever the case is. You start something, you create a neural pathway, you do it so often for so many days, and then boom, you know, you're stuck. It works to your advantage or disadvantage. But for anybody to say it doesn't work, it's not real, it's just stupid. You know, makes no sense. So anyways, I'm not going to go any further unless I have to, but when I play, I might play one more part of Thunder Wizard's thing that I recorded, and then I'll play at least 2 TED Talks. The one's only 5 minutes, it's like halfway through where I started. The other one is longer because she goes into what she does with the rats and all that, and how, you know, how it relates to us and depression and all that. So it's very beneficial, but I don't want to keep beating this horse to death either. Like, I just, you know, I gotta take my own advice, but, you know, because if I stay on this, man, I'm gonna go and go and go and go, and I won't stop. So anyways, thanks for listening. Have a great fucking day.
ideas. It lets our mind plan because of what would never have materialized otherwise if you were focused on something else, on your phone, for example. This is a mode, especially when we do this deliberately, when we deliberately let our mind wander. I call this mode scatter focus. And the research shows that it lets our mind come up with ideas. It lets our mind plan because of where our mind wanders to. This is fascinating. It turns out that when we just let our attention rest, it goes to three main places. We think about the past, we think about the present, and we think about the future. But we think about the past less than we might think. Only about 12% of the time, and often the time we're recalling ideas in these thought-wandering episodes. But the present, which is a much more productive place to wander, we wander to think about the present 28% of the time. And so this is, it's something as simple as you're typing up an email and you can't find a way to phrase something because it's very delicate, maybe it's political. You go and walk to another room, you go to another room of the house, of the office, and the solution hits you because your mind had a chance to approach it and prod at that problem from different directions. But here's the thing. Our minds wander to think about the future more than the past and the present combined. Whenever our mind is wandering, we think about the future 48% of the time. This is why when we're taking a shower, we plan out our entire day, even though it hasn't started yet. Right? This is called our mind's prospective bias, and it occurs when our mind wanders. If you're good with math, or maths, I should say, not in Canada anymore, these numbers don't add up to 100. It's because the rest of the time our mind is dull, it's blank, or it doesn't have an idea inside of it that is rooted in time. But whatever it is for you that lets your mind wander, something that's simple, something that doesn't consume your full attention. Mine happens to be something that is not necessarily stereotypic of my age and gender demographic, but I love to knit. Knitting is one of my favorite hobbies. I knit in planes, I knit on trains, I knit in hotel rooms. I was knitting in the hotel room before this event today because it helps calm you down, it helps settle your nerves. And I come up with so many ideas when I knit. I have a notepad next to me. But whatever it is for you, it might be taking that extra long shower. It might be taking a bath, upgrading your shower to a bath so you can soak not just with your body but with your ideas as well. Could be simple. If you're at work, walking from one room to another in the office. Very simple change, but if you don't use your phone during that walk, your mind will go to the meeting that you're about to attend. It'll go to the call that you were just on. It'll wander to the ideas that are circulating, and it'll make you more creative in this way. It could be something as simple as waiting in line and just, waiting in line. It could be getting a massage. Whatever it is that lets your mind, I love this picture so much. Whatever you love doing, here's a pro tip. Ask your masseuse to let you have a notepad in the session because ideas always come to you and you're always incubating things, and so capture them so you can act upon them later. But I think after doing this deep dive into the research, we need to make two fundamental shifts with regard to how we think about our attention. We think that we need to fit more in. There's all this talk about hustling. I'm an anti-hustler. I'm one of the laziest people you'll ever meet, and I think that's what gives me so many ideas to talk and write about. We don't need to fit more in. We're doing enough. We're doing too much. We're doing so much that our mind never wanders anymore. It's sad. This is when our best ideas and plans come to us. We need more space. If you look at what allows traffic to move down a highway, what allows it to move forward isn't how fast cars are moving, as you might expect. It's how much space exists between the cars that allows traffic to move forward. Our work and our life are the same way. The second shift, we like to think of distraction as the enemy of focus. It is not. It is a symptom of why we find it difficult to focus, which is the fact that our mind is overstimulated. I have a challenge for you. It's a 2-week challenge, but it's a challenge to make your mind a bit less stimulated and simply notice what happens to your attention. How many ideas do you get? How does your focus change? How many plans do you make? So for 2 weeks, make your mind less stimulated. There are so many great features on phones, on devices, that'll let us eliminate a lot of the time we waste on our devices. Use those features, not only to become aware of how you spend your time, but how you can spend less so you have more ideas. Have a disconnection ritual every evening. One of my favorite daily rituals, I disconnect from the internet completely from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. My fiance and I, we have a weekly disconnection ritual, a technology Sabbath every Sunday, so we can disconnect from the digital world and reconnect with the physical world, the real, actual world. Rediscover boredom. You don't have to do it for an hour. Please don't call Air Canada. It's just a world of hell. But rediscover boredom just for a few minutes. Lay on the couch, and where does your mind go? And scatter your attention. You'll find some remarkably fruitful things in that attentional zone. If there's one thing that I have found to be true after doing this deep dive into this world on how we focus, it's that the state of our attention is what determines the state of our lives. If we're distracted in each moment, those moments of distraction and overstimulation build up and accumulate to create a life that feels more distracted and overwhelming, like we don't have a clear direction. But when we become less stimulated, when we make our mind more calm, we get the benefits of added productivity and focus and ideas and creativity, but we also live a better life because of it. Thank you so much.
Such a wonderful experience to be here in beautiful Bermuda. Thanks for coming out today. Like most of you, we don't get a lot of downtime, but when I get some downtime, I really love to read a mystery. It seems that our brains, our human brains with all of our complex circuits, are uniquely designed to put the pieces of the puzzle together and to solve mysteries. But one mystery that's really been troubling me lately is the mystery of why, in the midst of a multi-billion-dollar antidepressant industry, depression rates continue to go up. About 300 million people across the world today experience depression. And this isn't good. We need to do better. It's unacceptable. It makes us think that maybe there are some other suspects, some other clues where we can get some information about how to come to the solution and solve this mystery of depression. Well, one area where we've spent a lot of time looking for clues is neurochemistry. And this makes perfect sense because our brains are swimming in neurochemicals. Dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, glutamate, and they have a huge impact on our behaviors, our emotions, our thoughts. So it makes perfect sense to think that we could take a pill that could change our neurochemistry in ways that would make us feel better, to be emotionally resilient. But there are challenges with this because it's hard to mimic nature in that if there is an imbalance that's associated with something like depression, how do we make it take a pill and change the neurochemistry in these natural ways? So it's not very precise, and unfortunately it doesn't help, reliably help everyone who has depression. So it makes us think that there are some other clues and suspects out there. So being a neuroscientist, when I go back to the drawing board, that drawing board is a brain. And I wanted to be, as I tell my students, let's be brain whisperers of a sort, and see what is important to the brain. And what really stands out to me is how our brains seem to be designed and evolved to move our bodies around. We like to think that our brains are about thinking, but movement is an incredibly important behavior. If we think about the cerebellum hanging off the back of our brains, it contains about 80% of our brain's neurons. 80%. And what does the cerebellum do? Well, it does a lot of things, but it's most noted for its role in controlling our motor coordination. And the areas that around the center of the brain, called the striatum, also involved in coordinating and facilitating our movement. And in fact, individuals who have Parkinson's disease or Huntington's disease have some impairment of the system. And then going from the middle of our brain down to our ear is the motor cortex. And it's involved in moving the specific muscles that are important for us to initiate and carry out that behavior that we want to carry out. And if you look at the proportion of that motor cortex and what the muscles that it's coordinating and controlling, it's the area that controls the hand is disproportionately large. It seems like nature is telling us movement is incredibly important, and movement of our hands is also very important. And if that's true, what would happen if, say, we decided that we weren't going to move around as much? Maybe we're going to spend a lot of time sitting down in front of screens. Would that have some impact on our brains? Maybe so. And it's interesting to think over the past century just how much our lifestyle has changed. It's about 100 years ago, over these 100 years, but it's hard to believe that just in 1939, and the New York Times ran an article about this invention that was revealed at the World's Fair. It was called the television. It was really a neat thing, they said, but they said it will never be more popular than the radio, because what family has time to sit in front of a TV in the evenings and not use their hands to do work? Wow, things have really changed over the last century and past generations. When I think about my own childhood, driving back to Talladega, Alabama to see my grandparents, I have vivid memories of how busy, especially my grandmother, was. After working in the factory, her downtime was spent shelling peas or shucking corn or snapping green beans on that front porch, only to be followed by freezing and canning and preparing that food, so that in the winter when she would bring that food out and prepare these wonderful Sunday dinners, I saw the pride on her face, because now thinking back, she had to bring up these memories of how the role she played in providing that food for her family. And it really made me see this pride. And if someone was sick in her community, I remember her saying, I'm from Alabama, bless her heart, she couldn't have her own garden, so I'm going to take her these vegetables so at least she can prepare them for the winter. Wow, how things have changed. I'm beginning to think that maybe when we traded in our spears and our clubs for selfie sticks, that maybe we've traded in something really important for our brain. And what if our cultural contemporary ideas of prosperity, in which we work really hard to make enough money to pay people to do the things our grandparents and ancestors used to do very well for themselves, maybe that doesn't match our brain's idea of prosperity. And maybe that mismatch could lead to some contribution of psychiatric illness, these high rates that we're seeing today. In fact, our ancestors' dependence on their hands and interacting with the environment to provide the resources just to live for that day might have been the original Prozac, the prehistoric Prozac that perhaps we need to remember. But this idea isn't new. Charles Darwin, who was the great naturalist, wrote that he had a lot of angst when he was dealing and writing and musing about this idea of natural selection and how controversial it was and the impact it would have on his family and friends and ideas about religion and the origin of our species. And he said that when he would walk around his property, and there was a path called the thinking path, that it would calm his nerves. And he would put a rock at the gate, and he would have his walking stick, and when he would walk around that path, he would knock that rock off to signify the effort that he had made. And if it was an especially stressful day, he'd put 2 rocks. And even more, he might have a 3-rock walk, and he'd have to walk 3 times and knock that stone over. Well, he wasn't just realizing that his behavior was important in regulating his emotions, but he was even dosing himself. And whether or not he was going to have a 1-walk, 2-walk, or 3-walk day. So this idea of behavior was incredible. He saw that it was important for regulating his mental health. And in the days when cake mixes came out, mostly women making the cakes those days. The first cake mixes had everything you needed to make the cake. You just needed to pour the batter in the pan. But some very smart manufacturers noticed that women didn't take as much pride in their cakes if they didn't have a little skin in the game. So then they didn't have to, but they took the egg and the water. So you'd have to add the egg and the water. Gave you a little bit more effort, and people were more proud of the cake. So thinking that behavior is important for our mental health, and we can change our behavior and change our neurochemistry through behavior, as our ancestors have, it caused me to think about a new word, a word I just made up, behaviorceuticals. So we can change our neurochemistry by taking a pill that will alter our neurochemistry, or maybe we can change our neurochemistry strategically by engaging in smart behaviors that will change it in more healthy ways. Well, I was reading that about 100 years ago, doctors used to prescribe knitting to women in those days who they described as overwrought with anxiety. They didn't know why, but they saw that it calmed their nerves, kind of like Darwin. Knowing now what we know about neuroscience, this makes perfect sense. Serotonin is increased when we are engaged in repetitive behavior. And the knitting and making the stitches is an example of repetitive behavior. As the knitter is thinking about that beautiful scarf or hat that she or he is making, that increases dopamine. It's known as the pleasure neurochemical of the brain, but it's mostly involved with anticipation, looking forward to something. And as you think about the stitches instead of the worries of the day, that probably calms and reduces stress hormones. And if there was one neurochemical that probably is a culprit, a suspect in a lot of the mysteries related to mental health, it's these stress hormones. Cortisol, for example. About 50% of everyone diagnosed with depression has high cortisol levels. So anything we can do to depress that or decrease the stress hormones is an important endeavor. And if we're knitting in the company of friends, then that may increase oxytocin. And oxytocin is known as the cuddle chemical, but it's important in fostering positive relationships and also probably reduces stress. So here you go, a behaviorceutical with one activity of knitting. It may be cooking or woodworking or gardening, but something that's reminding you that your physical effort is the result of that is some reward. So I'm a neuroscientist, so we want to go back to the brain. I can remember the drawing board here. And I was fascinated to see that the area of the brain that is involved in reward, that is impacted in depression, lack of feeling that reward, is the nucleus accumbens, kind of lower in the brain. And it has rich connections to that area of the brain involved in movement called the striatum. And those areas have indirect and direct connections to the frontal cortex that's involved in our decision-making and planning. And the more that we engage in behaviors where we can see the result of our effort, those circuits are consolidating so that as we go forward for the next challenge in our life, we have a little of experiential capital to bring with us, to remind us that what we do can make a difference. We did produce that scarf. We made that cake. We walked around the thinking path. I work with rats for a living. These are my colleagues, and they outsmart me all the time. As a scientist, we need evidence. So all of that theorizing about our ancient humans and ideas about depression, it started to make sense, but I wanted to take this to the lab. A lot of friends and people who find out what I do, they ask, but what can you learn about our brains, our fancy schmancy brains, by looking at this very simplistic brain? Well, it is true that it's small. It's 2 grams compared to our about 1,400 gram brain, but it has all the same parts, all the same neurochemicals. And if I showed you a neuron, that individual cell in a human brain versus a rat brain, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So it's a wonderful model to start with. I realize that a rat is not a little human, and we're not a big rat, but it's a good model. Well, some of us maybe. So when I was thinking I wanted to put these rats to work, I'm thinking about this idea about work and producing products that we're proud of. I needed something that the rats would work for, and our rats love Fruit Loops. So we had to get them addicted to Fruit Loops, and then I needed a task. And I thought back to my grandmother's garden, and I wanted them to harvest something. So we came up with a task where they would harvest Fruit Loops, not fruit or vegetables, but they would dig up Fruit Loops. So they have this arena, and we'd move around these mounds of bedding, and they were trained, so when you see a mound, you go and you just gently dig, and voila, there's a Fruit Loop. And they had an opportunity to get 4 of those every day. So it's not intensive training, it's about 5 or 10 minutes a day for about 6 weeks, but they're building those connections between the reward areas of the brain and the motor movement areas of the brain to produce effort-based rewards. Well, for proper science, you need a control group to compare to this experimental group. So our control group was a group that we put in the same arena, and we gave them their Fruit Loops regardless of what they did. So my students like to call the experimental group, where their effort was contingent upon their behavior, or their rewards were contingent upon their behavior, the worker rats. And the rats that got the reward no matter what, there wasn't a contingency there, the trust fund rats. So we have the worker rats and the trust fund rats. And so next we wanted to, so we've done several studies. So I see you can relate to that a little bit. Done several studies where we wanted to put our worker rats to the test to see if this effort-based reward training generalized to other things. So we like to expose them to new challenges, like swimming. They've been in the lab, they've never been in water. Well, the effort-based reward worker rats, they're more likely to dive down like little rat scuba divers to explore the environment. And they showed more evidence of effective coping. And when we look at their brains, I think brains are gorgeous here, they show more evidence of neuroplasticity, that fertilizer, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, more complex connections with the neurons. So we see this neuroplasticity. And for the interventions and therapeutic approaches that we have currently for depression, most of those directly or indirectly increase neuroplasticity. But here we're doing it naturally. But that was with training. We wanted another way to stimulate effort-based rewards that was more spontaneous. So we've known for a while that if you put a rat in an exciting, engaging world, something we call an enriched environment, kind of a Disneyland of sorts, they're busier and they have more neuroplasticity, and it seems to be great for their brains. So we did this, and we also have, we look at artificial, kind of manufactured stimuli and more natural stimuli. So we have our country rats and our city rats. And they seem to be equally smart, but our country rats seem to have an edge on emotional resilience. So they're more like those effort-based reward rats that'll go out, the bold ones. And also with our effort-based reward rats, we see lower stress hormones and higher hormones of resilience. And remember, we said that was important for mental health. So we, interestingly also, we found that when we have a group of rats in the enriched environment and a group of rats in just a standard environment, they do things more together, not only in engaging with their environment, but through cooperation. And so we've actually shown that their oxytocin that we talked about increases when they're engaged in these natural and enriched environments doing things together. And that's important for our behavior-ceutical cocktail. This doesn't surprise me because recently in Denmark they showed that humans, they followed about 1 million, who grew up with, and their childhood household had more green around it, shrubs, trees. They were up to 55% less likely to experience depression in their life. If we could bottle that, whoa, that would be amazing. So, where does that leave us? We're not going to go back to the cave. We're not going to go back to being hunters and gatherers. We're here in this advanced, technologically rich world, and we benefit in many ways from that. But looking back at what we know about our ancestors and the brain and my wise rats, I think it reminds us that we need to remember our evolutionary roots as we go forward in this world of technology and have a little bit of those effort-based rewards, especially if it's related to nature in some way, to help us in our mental health. Well, and I had an experience where I got to put this to the test to see if an engaged, enriched environment would allow the rats to show to healthier brains. And I had a colleague who asked me, Kelly, can you teach a rat to drive a car? And I thought, well, why would I want to do that? That's not and it goes against everything I thought, but we drive cars, and before I knew it, we were talking about how you would get a rat to drive a car, and how you would shape it to go in. We decided it would grab the little copper bars, and of course it would be driving to a Fruit Loop tree. That's their drive-in. And if you've ever wondered if you could teach a rat to drive a car, yes, you can. Not only can they drive, but they can steer. They're auto-correcting, right? And this blew my mind, but more relevant for this story is when we looked at rats that were in the enriched environment versus the standard environment. The rats in the enriched environment, when we took them through the ropes of driving to see how long it would take them to learn to drive the criterion for robust driving, they learned in 22 trials. The standard rats, it took, well, we don't know how long it would take. They never really learned to drive. This blew our minds that the enriched environment made our rats better learners of technology. So we think that our enriched rats would get their driver's license, but not so much for the rodents. They would be denied. So, as we think about our brains and what they evolved to do, the idea of taking a single pill and being able to replicate what goes on in our brains naturally seems as just about as unreasonable as thinking that we could take a pill to be a better parent. You just can't do that. You have to go through the ropes. You have to have those experiences to go forward. You have to have the behavior that leads to behaviorseuticals to change the neurochemistry in healthy ways. So I started with a mystery. What's going on with our brains? Why are these rates increasing? And looking back and thinking about how our behavior can change not only our neurochemistry, but our neuroanatomy. I think that the solution and clues may have been in our hands all along. Thank you.